Continuing our mitigation series, today's lesson will cover assistive and adaptive technology and how it can help the person that you care for or provide services for during and after a disaster. Before we begin, here's a quick overview of today's lesson. Today we're going to cover the following topics in more detail: adaptive versus assistive technology, the needs for the technology, the different types of technology, use during and after a disaster, and the resources available. So what is assistive and adaptive technology, and what is the difference? Some of you may know and some of you may not, but there is a distinct difference. Assistive technology is anything used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities and independence of persons with disabilities, aging populations, and people with non-communicable diseases, whereas adaptive technology covers items that are specifically designed for persons with disabilities and would seldom be used by non-disabled persons. These technologies allow individuals to live happy, productive, and inclusive lives. By the end of this training, you will be able to explain the differences between adaptive and assistive technology, identify reasons why individuals might need these devices, explore different types of devices available to support individuals with disabilities, recognize the importance of these devices during a disaster, learn how these devices can aid your client in the aftermath of a disaster, and know where to find information on how to obtain these devices. People with disabilities face extra sets of challenges when disaster strikes. For example, depending on the assistive or adaptive device used, sometimes a disaster can render that device inoperable or inaccessible. Perhaps there's a financial component that is preventing them from purchasing that equipment. There are many reasons why someone may not have a device or be able to access it when needed. When looking at alerting systems, what happens if the person is deaf or hard of hearing and cannot hear an alarm or siren warning of danger? What if that individual is blind? Various disabilities can hinder someone's ability to receive an alert or alarm. As discussed in the last training, there may also be barriers to evacuation and arriving first responders. What about individuals with sensory sensitivities? Would being in a large, crowded, and loud evacuation shelter be a suitable environment for someone with sensory sensitivities? What about being surrounded by dozens of emergency vehicles with bright flashing lights? During a disaster, there are many intrusive sources to those with sensory sensitivities. Lastly, what about those with mobility issues? What if there is debris, floodwaters, or other impediments to using mobility aids such as wheelchairs or walkers? This is not an all-inclusive list, but rather a selection of some I have chosen to highlight for the purposes of today's lesson. Considering the challenges we just discussed, what technologies exist to help overcome some of these? We will start with some of the assistive technology that exists. For those who are deaf or hard of hearing, there are bed shaker alarms that do exactly what they say they do. In lieu of an auditory alarm, the alarm strongly shakes the bed or pillow to wake the individual up. Many of these alarms can be tied to a fire or carbon monoxide alarm and include a visual of what the alarm is for. They can even be tied to a NOAA weather alarm radio. Another option is a life alert or personal alarm. If an individual needs help but cannot get to a phone, having this necklace or bracelet allows them to call for help anywhere in their home. Some of these are also GPS enabled and work outside of the home. There are also phone apps meant specifically for disasters, and some are meant specifically for those with disabilities. Going back to the bedshake alarm, some of these can also be tied to visual alarms with bright flashing lights that can be placed around the home to alert someone, deaf or hard of hearing, of danger. Next, we will cover some of the adaptive technology that exists. As a note, while our earlier definition stated that adaptive technology is typically used only by those with disabilities, when it comes to disasters, these technologies can be used by others as well, but for different reasons than those we serve. One of the most obvious adaptive technologies are wheelchairs, which are meant specifically for those with disabilities, whether temporary from a broken leg or permanent in the case of a quadriplegic. Speech-generating devices and other similar tablet-based devices exist for those who have limited abilities when it comes to verbal communication. These devices allow individuals who cannot communicate verbally to interact with others. Therefore, this is a very important device that should be safeguarded and considered to be an extension of the individual. Those with sensory sensitivities may use noise-canceling headphones to reduce auditory overstimulation. These are useful in an evacuation shelter scenario if there are no other options available. Lastly, there are several commercial GPS tracking devices as well. These devices allow family members to keep track of their loved ones. These can be used for those with Alzheimer's as well as those with other disabilities. The specific device featured below, AngelSense, is designed for those individuals who are served here at TCRC. This is not an endorsement of the product, rather it is being highlighted as a GPS device with a specific targeted customer base. Now that we have discussed adaptive and assistive technologies available, let's move on to a conversation about how these can be vital to those we serve during a disaster. For communication tools, these are vital as they allow individuals to call for help and interact with first responders or disaster workers. For those that are unable to communicate verbally, text-generating devices connect them to the world. For those who are deaf, communication cards are also valuable and allow the individual to point to their needs represented by illustrations. There are many reasons why these are vital, but ultimately it allows individuals who otherwise couldn't convey vital information to those around them. Emergency alert notifications systems, these aids allow individuals to be warned of an approaching weather event or present danger. Having a NOAA weather radio with a visual aid and bed shaker for those who are deaf will give the individual the information needed to prepare for what is coming. Another type of aid is smart home automation, which can allow control from a mobile phone in the event you can't make it to the door. An example would be unlocking the door so that responders wouldn't have to break the door down. Wearable devices and tracking systems. These wearable devices can help locate loved ones during disaster, especially if you get separated. If your client didn't make it to their day center and a disaster occurred, you or their family can see where they are. Were they in the affected area? Adaptive technology for environmental awareness and navigation, or mobile apps. Some apps focus specifically on those with various types of disabilities. WheelMap, for example, is an app that contains user-submitted data about wheelchair accessibility in various businesses and locations. Now that we've explored how adaptive and assistive technology can assist individuals with IDD during a disaster, let's focus on the recovery phase. After disaster, these technologies can continue to help those as they move into the recovery phase of a disaster. At this point in disaster, your client may need to access new to them resources and aid, more so than ever. These technologies can help streamline this process with helpful apps and communicating with disaster relief workers. One thing many of us do not think enough about are the mental health impacts of a disaster. There are several apps that exist to help support mental health. This is especially important to your client because those with IDD are at higher risk of suffering from anxiety and depression following the interruption of their normal routines. Depending on the scale of the disaster, it is important to ensure that your client's voice is heard. If significant damage or rebuilding needs to be completed, ensure that rebuilding is inclusive and meets their needs. Empower them to be vocal so that things are built back not only more resilient, but more inclusive as well. Help them to use the technology at their disposal to make a case for why rebuilding is not enough, but that building back better is warranted. Now that we have covered several technologies and how they can be utilized both during and after disaster, I wanted to share just a fraction of the resources available for those we serve. Also, if you know of any others, please feel free to share them with me, and I will be sure to post them on our website. You can find the contact information in the Emergency Resources section of the TCR website or at the slide near the end of this presentation. With that said, most utility companies will have some sort of program. Most are income-driven, but there are more medical needs and location-based ones as well. If you live in an area they consider covered, PG&E or SCE have programs that get out free portable backup batteries for medical baseline customers to use during power outages. These are typically done on a loan basis and are not considered permanent. In addition, the American Red Cross offers free fire alarms for certain individuals as well. Those needing the visual and bed shake alarms discussed earlier may be able to get those as well from American Red Cross. Lastly, in the first issue of the Spring 2024 Rescue Bulletin, you will find a list of current initiatives for which those you serve may also be available to qualify for. In addition, new initiatives will be covered as they are released. Here is an example of a version of the bed shake alarm being used with a weather radio.
Find it hard to hear the tornado sirens, there are now new attachments for a NOAA weather radio that caters to people who are hard of hearing. This is including a strobe light, which will flash when the radio goes off, or a shaker, which you can clip to your pillow and feel the vibrations while you're sleeping.
This has just been a passion of mine to really reach out in this community, to not only help them, but also help others know about the needs that are out there and how they could also help too.
The National Weather Service has also developed a slogan, "See a flash, dash inside," as an alternative to the more common phrase, "When thunder roars, go indoors."
These resource links can be found on the TCRC website in the Rescue Tri-County section and are also listed below in the description of this video. They cover phone application lists for those with disabilities to consider downloading, some guidelines for emergency evacuation for those with disabilities. I've also included a link to the Angel Sense tracking device. Again, this is not an endorsement. This is more just to show you something that exists specifically for individuals that we serve. And you'll also see there is an assistive device consideration during emergency situations. And this just goes into some more information on things to consider when planning for disasters. This would be the time where you could ask questions if I was presenting this in person. However, since you're watching this recorded version, please send any questions you may have to the TCRC ERC. My contact information can be found above. In summary, today we covered the difference between assistive and adaptive technology, some of the challenges faced during disasters by those who may use this technology, some of the assistive and adaptive technologies and devices available, and several of the uses for this technology both during and after a disaster. Thank you so much for your time and your commitment to safety and disaster preparedness. I welcome any and all feedback on this training. Here you will find the references for the material presented in today's presentation. It can be found on the TCRC website for the links directly or in the description section of this video.